Kia ora, welcome to the first series of Stuff That Matters Now, a podcast brought to you by Collective Intelligence. I'm Harv, aka Ian Harvey, founder of Collective Intelligence, and it's going to be my great pleasure in this series to introduce to you a bunch of really cool people who are making a difference in the world every single day. Our job here at Collective Intelligence is to help curious people evolve and become more courageous so they can tackle the stuff that's needed to make this world a better place. You're about to listen to an epic chat I've just had with one of our many change-making Collective Intelligence members. Let's have a quick listen to a wee clip of some of the stuff we've talked about to give you an idea of what's ahead. What's the bomb that needs to be dropped into society to create a different world?
Learning. We have to get warm to the idea of that we don't know the answers to everything, and if we learn together, if we provide leadership that is around what is it here for us to learn, then our system will evolve. We've as humans in this last century and a half, we have come to recognize that we weren't plopped here in a certain way, we evolved. And so we are beneficiaries of evolution that happened. We have some confidence that, okay, complex systems will evolve, good things will emerge, and it's possible to figure out how to do things better. It's possible to figure out how to survive in a changing world. Learning is the answer.
Before we crack on and talk about the stuff today's guest had to share with us, a big shout out to Rob McDonald and his talented team at Timaru Estate over there in Hawke's Bay. Not only do these guys make international gold medal winning wines, they've helped us bring this podcast to your ears. Brilliant stuff, thank you, Rod. So today I get the chance to interview Ballard Pritchett, who is a profoundly interesting guy, all the way from the US, living now in Timaru with his lovely wife. And I am really excited to be interviewing Ballard because this guy has developed a new program working with DHBs. He is a very experienced guy, very deep thinker, and a huge range of knowledge and expertise and a huge intellect. So sit back and enjoy hearing something that is going to be quite unique. So Ballard, thank you for hosting me.
Harv, it's my privilege. Thank you so very much for putting me on.
So immediately we've got a slightly different accent to some of the other interviewees. So Ballard, let's just kick straight into it and give us an idea. Where have you come from? Where did your life begin?
Well, before there was me.
Before there was you.
Before there was me, my family moved to Texas from Missouri. And they came down there to basically to civilize the frontier. And train teachers to be teachers in a place where public education was kind of a new thought. So I do come from a lineage of people who've been associated with education.
And what year was that? When did they move down?
Oh, about 1880. And I moved to southeast area of Texas and ended up president of a university that trained teachers to be teachers, and a couple of generations back, and there's been educators without interruption from then until now, as well as business people and other more socially minded folks.
Right.
So I went to a public university, very, very good one.
And whereabouts?
In Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas.
What people there refer to as the university. And studied psychology. I had been trained. I thought I was going to end up in the sciences, the physical sciences. But somewhere along the way, I decided that human beings were more interesting than the periodic chart, and a little more complicated after all.
Yeah.
So that's really been my passion for a long time, is what does it take for us to be successful humans? How to be human. And still working
and
on that.
And what does that even mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? Well, I've had dogs and some other kinds of critters. I have close family who've raised horses, and I have learned that if you're going to train a particular breed of dogs, you need to understand how they're different from other breeds. If you're going to train this kind of horse instead of another kind of horse, you have to understand what's a thoroughbred versus a quarter horse. If you're going to train humans, you kind of have to understand how humans work. It's not so obvious or easy, in part because we're like the fish in the water. Our human social life is, well, let me put it this way, how much of your life do you spend, Harv, focusing on thinking about and interacting with other humans?
Most of it.
Most of it, except for when you're asleep. And then your dreams are full of people.
Yeah, sometimes they get there too.
We're very social creatures. And while we may have other disciplines that we may be farmers or we may be scientists or carpenters or whatever, but really our lives are largely filled up, and the meaning of our lives largely comes from our sense of being human and relationships with other people.
So when you went to university, when you went there, what did you have any inkling of what you wanted to do with this education?
I did have some inklings. Some of them sort of went by the wayside. Being a politician was one possibility.
You could be president now.
Well, I'm almost too old, but not as old as the ones who are in the running. My goodness. I was somewhat religious as a young person, and what I found was that the kinds of values and caring that and eagerness to make the world a better place that was most important to me, I encountered more in some religious settings than other places. Eventually, I moved away from that altogether. So somebody asked me not too long ago if I was religious, and I said, no, I haven't been in 35 years. But it was, in many ways, my sort of faith and confidence about the value of life and the importance of what we're doing feels very similar. My interest in care and inspiration and humility and authenticity are probably at a life peak right now. So I've discarded a lot of the tools and trinkets that people use to construct religions out of. And I was able to do that because of the tools that those people I studied with gave me. The authenticity and integrity, the rigor of the people that I studied with in the religion field greatly exceeded the counterparts in the psychology department at the university. They were far more open to discovering what the truth is. And they gave me the tools and really a great setup for the philosophies that have guided my life ever since.
Interesting. My parents, my mother was I called her an academic Christian. So she read the Bible, she could recite it back and so forth. She wasn't so good at practicing some of the Christian principles, but she liked the book and the stories, and
it's very compelling.
Yeah, and reciting those back. My father went along to church from time to time to keep my mother happy. The irony was one of his best friends was an archdeacon, and they used to hang out together a lot, even though they he wasn't a churchgoer as such. And I used to love debating with my mother, and she said, "No, your father's not a Christian, dear, and he's a humanitarian." And I went, "Well, that's cool. I like that side." And she said, "Yes, but he doesn't believe in God." I said, "Yeah, I'm okay with that, because my father practiced. He had a love of people, and he cared for people, and he put that into action."
Yes.
And I was far more drawn to that than I was going to church and listening to what you could do. Yeah.
Funny thing about religions are all built out of ritual and language.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's. If you get involved in a religion, you have to learn things to say, and you have to you have to participate in certain kinds of rituals. That's the coin of the realm, as it were. But the more contemporary expression of things like mindfulness are done without words, and done not necessarily alone, can be done in a group, but it's actually gets us far closer to the deep mysteries beneath us than the worst thing about a religion is when it's convinced it's correct.
Isn't that a lovely space to be?
Yes.
I'm right.
Yes.
Yeah, worked it all out.
Yeah, it's one of the things, a debt that we all owe, I think, in some respect or another, to the Buddhist tradition, is the value of being in a place of not knowing.
Mm.
I credit them with that. I don't know who they borrowed it from, but it's a valuable learning.
Yeah, it's we're sort of getting ahead of ourselves here, Bella, but it's an interesting space to be comfortable in, of not knowing and being okay with that.
It's actually simple. It's just honesty. The truth is we don't know.
Okay, so we could wrap that up. That's the shortest podcast ever. Thank you, Ballard. We're done. We don't know. Brilliant. We can go. We can go home. All right. So for those listening, Ballard doesn't know shit. I don't know shit. It's fabulous.
But it's lovely.
But it's lovely. Okay. So look, I don't know anything about. Just go back to the Austin, Texas University. Then, how long were you there for?
Well, 4 years, and then I was back a couple of years later for an internship. I picked up my bride there. 46 years since. Certainly the best thing ever happened to me.
Yes, and I can vouch for that. And I'm not sure how you did it. Obviously, you learned something, while you were studying there to convince her.
Harv, neither one of us, neither you nor I, could explain how we got so lucky.
Okay. Cool. We'll move on from that. So you got your degree, did your internship, got a bride.
Went off and did 4 more years of graduate school. And then subsequently, a 3 other graduate programs.
So what year is this, roughly?
Oh, that was graduated college and university in 73.
Mm-hmm.
Next one was 77. We had a baby by then. And had a job in Chicago for a year in a religious setting. Decided that wasn't for me. And moved to Houston, back to Houston, grandparents for the baby, and took a job at university working with students, being an advisor and guide for students, and did a doctorate in work and organizations, and then moved into the business sector.
Because why?
Because I had the term from Latin is vocatio. The English language is calling. So, what am I here for? Why am I here? What's my thing to do? And my vocatio, I recognized very profoundly in the early 80s, was to work in in the work setting, in the economic environment, to make that work better. That's where my life's work was going to be.
Right. So it was taking your learnings into the commercial field.
Yeah.
And was that in a corporate?
Yes. I was part of a small boutique psychology, sort of a typology oriented. We had a proprietary typology scheme, how people are different from each other. And we did training and development, organizational work, strategy work for a number of organizations, but the primary one was a large mortgage banker, national mortgage banking organization of thousands and thousands of people.
Yep.
And so they taught me their industry. I taught them about how to work together better and have good strategies, how to develop people. And I hung in there with them for about 8 years.
And what was the biggest surprise going into the commercial world?
The biggest surprise for me, aside from the fact that all those people, however high their office, they're really not any greater or grander than everybody else you meet along the way. There's a fairly powerful people in that organization. But the surprise for me was how large their blind spots could be. How much I could see that the culture of sort of affluence, of all this money flowing by, led a company into taking risky bets and ending up in bankruptcy.
Right.
And it was the personal character of the CEO who was highly self-indulgent in his personal habits and his expenditures. The last meeting I had, he and I in his newly built executive dining room, private executive dining room, had all been remodeled at significant expense on his floor of this high-rise in downtown Dallas. And we were discussing how the bankruptcy was going. And all the artwork, I'm from a very, I told you, educator background, middle class, smart, educated people, but not people of means. And so when I see people who have a whole lot of money and sort of use it to make themselves feel more comfortable by having fancy environments and limousines and this and that, to me that seems like you're spending somebody else's money.
Yeah.
When you're doing that. And this was a publicly traded stock company. People were invested in it. And they were told it was a conservative financial institution and their money was in safe hands. My father lost every penny he had put in there. But the truth was, I learned how to read the financial statements, annual reports and whatnot that this gentleman wrote. They were, he was a lawyer. They were quite complicated. He wasn't interested in actually communicating people the truth. He was interested in looking like it was some big, proud institution. But and they had 17 consecutive quarters of nice increments in profitability. But I knew from the inside that virtually every one of those quarters was propped up by a one-off.
Right.
But they didn't go up and down. They did just enough of a one-off to make it look like, well, in finance terms, to keep the beta really low,
right,
to keep the measure of variability small.
Right.
And that worked until the various tricks that they were playing collapsed. And it taught me a lot about authenticity and integrity and what it takes to actually have that. As opposed to the people whose position earns them credibility and respect by default. We know today you actually can have very high-profile individuals in government or other places who are liars and scoundrels with no integrity whatsoever, who can lie how many times a day would you like? I think probably you can infer some possibilities as to who those figures might be.
I've got no idea. and we're more than likely to get a new one in the UK in the not too distant future.
Yes. So the surprise to me was that as I got to know big, important people, they put their intellectual pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. And in many cases, they had more fear and less comfort with who they are than the butcher, the farmer, the mechanic.
Yeah. It's interesting, Ballard, but it fascinates me that where we've come from, that often people got into those positions because they were competitive, because they were aggressive, because they told lies, because they put themselves forward, and next thing, they're at the top of the tree.
Yes, and which is not to ignore the fact that we have some amazing leaders that show up from time to time who generously use their lives to make the world a better place, to benefit their peers. And how we can have such a sharp contrast between these exceptional leaders and people who demonstrate leadership in such healthy ways, and then to be succeeded in office or place by someone who utterly lacks those qualities. And these decisions are made by the general public in the United States, so to speak, with the help of Russia.
So Ballard, how did these corporate people handle a young man pointing out their blind spots or trying to work with these blind spots?
There were those who were very grateful, and there were those who were kind of mixing biological metaphors here, but who couldn't hear about their blind spot. They had audio blockages as well as visual ones, the things they couldn't hear. And I've had them tell me what it is I'm going to tell them.
Because they know.
Because they're going to hear what they want to hear anyway. And so they, but by and large, I would say, so those were the surprises. You asked me about the surprises. But by and large, I would say most of the people I've known in industry and government are good people doing hard jobs to the best of their ability. And it's these occasional exceptions that are so surprising.
Yeah. So after 8 years with that company, then what?
Well, we moved our family off to Durham, North Carolina, Duke University, and I did an MBA. And my wife she had done medical school across this period of time, and she did a fellowship in geriatrics. So we had 2 years. We had another son by then, and spent a couple of years there, and then moved to Colorado, where we spent the next 24 years. She working as a physician and me working in a variety of companies. Often in early stages, I've developed kind of a specialty in helping people get things up off the ground. Some of them I did on my behalf. Some of them I did because one of my chums called me and said, "Hey, I just bought this thing and it's a mess. Would you come?" And both profits and non-profits.
Yep. So what was the thing that Ballard was known for in that day and age? What was your thing?
Oh, golly. Well, I was known for being brought in to tidy up a mess.
Right.
Or to pull things together so that we could get something off the ground. So I recognized that I had two skills that the world didn't really have a label for at the time.
The world didn't have a
label for
a
word. There are words to be there, but they're not like specialties that you go get certified in.
Right.
So one was integration, being an integrator, pulling a bunch of disparate stuff together into a system, into an idea, making. And I've always had this unusually broad kind of curiosity in terms of topics. So I'll study a lot of different things. I'll go into an organization and I'll talk. There's no corner of it I don't go stick my nose in to find out about how it's going. And I have found that I can talk to all of those people. I have something in common with their field of expertise that allows me to have good conversation, and then digest all of that, integrate it. And that was when I discovered that was a thing, and I could spot other people who do that and know that it's not just because it's my way doesn't mean it's common. That's one of the things we discover as we go along in life. Things that we do easily and naturally, we sort of take for granted as being typical.
Yep.
Then we find out, I'm actually out of the ordinary in that respect. And the other thing that at one point I was putting together a description of what it was my skill set was. And I spent a few weeks on it. And one of my colleagues from down the hall, I brought him in, had him look at it. I was using the methods from the off-published, off-read book, What Color's Your Parachute, by a guy I studied with there. And he looked at my lists of things that I prioritized down to what I thought I did best that was maybe of most value. And my friend George looked at it and said, "Ballard, you're so stupid." And I said, "Oh, thank you, George. That's very helpful." He said, "You've done all this work and you've left off the single most important thing." And I said, "Okay, George, don't tease me. Tell me what it is that I left off the list." He says, "Ballard, I don't know anybody who could organize that much information that way and distill it like this. And you don't even have that on the list.
Right.
You don't even think about the fact that that's how you approach things." And I said, "I guess you're right, George. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I will amend my list." And since then, I have changed my behavior a bit. When a task comes up in an arena that I'm working in, and what's needed for success in that task falls into one of these two lead talents, I'll call them, I feel a bit of like I should raise my hand. I should say I'll offer to do that. Which what I have found is that if I'm trying to do what I do best, everybody else around me is a little more comfortable for two reasons. One, I'm not trying to be them, which they like that. And two, if I'm doing what I do best, it's probably going to be the best contribution I can make.
Yep.
And they get to do what they do best.
Yep.
So it really is, there have been things that I wanted to be better at, worked really hard at, to develop what I call hard-won mediocrity. And I'm very proud of things that I managed to bring up to the level of hard-won mediocrity. And there was a time when I was in high school, and
I have never heard that term before.
I was in the choir. It was a church choir. We were doing a cantata, and there was a phase in the piece of music where we were in sections, of course, in the choir, and my baritone section was supposed to start a piece a cappella after a pause. I forget the music term for the pause, but so we had to, the six of us had to hit the note simultaneously without any background music at all. So the choir director in practice would go down the row and point to the first boy and the second boy and the third boy, and of course I was the sixth boy. And she pointed to me, and I had been practicing and I'd been working, and I hit the note. Well, that was just wonderful. And then, you know what happened next? The entire choir clapped. They were so happy for me and for them that I wasn't going to have to just move my lips in public.
You could actually do it.
I could hit that one note on call.
Yeah.
So that's what I call hard-won mediocrity.
Yeah.
What we do naturally, as with a flair and a talent, if we polish it and master it, it's a gift to those around us.
Yeah.
And you're using your gift right now, Harv, in doing this.
I hope so. I'm not sure yet, but I hope so.
Well, you are. And the kind of energy you create around you and the way you relate to people, as well as the voice and all the skill. When we do what we do well, it serves everybody else in our human setting.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, that because it doesn't feel like hard work,
we undervalue it.
Yes.
We overvalue what we work so hard to accomplish, and we undervalue what we do easily.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily go away. I still see it happening in people in midlife and late professional years, still trying hard to prove themselves in some area that's not really their best suit. But it's so much more comfortable to be okay just being who I am and using my good stuff where it's wanted.
So what gets in the way, Bella? What gets in the way of people just embracing that and going, I'm going to go with that?
You know, we are conditioned by schooling training, by expectations from parents. There's just a whole lot of judgment built in to that we're raised within, and we embrace it. It just becomes, it's almost like it's in our bloodstream. We have to, we're expected to prove ourselves, and if we aren't looking at things that way, then we're not taking all that seriously, because we're not trying hard enough. We're not pushing ourselves.
Right.
We're not out on the edge. And yet, really working from a sense of well-being. Shout out to Steve Henry. If we're not working from a sense of well-being, if we're not working from a deeper place of withinness in our interactions in the world, then we're kind of scrambling. You've had a chance to, perhaps of late, to watch either the women play tennis or the women play football in Europe these days. The best place to play from is the middle of the court. The person who's chasing side to side to side to side to try to get something back in play sets themselves up for another difficult shot to follow. But if we can play from the center of the court, then we really have a nice advantage pursuing what it is we're trying to do. So finding what's the center of our court, finding the place from which to operate that we're most grounded in is a service, and so part of one of the things that I'm trying to do with the work we're doing with the DHB and developing leadership there is to invite people to think about their leadership and what it is they want to learn, on the idea that they're in the best position to know what their next step needs to be. They have some kind of hints. There's something that tells them this is what they're ready to learn. And that we do that best not in isolation but in a group.
So, Ballard, we're going to get to that, and so we don't get ahead of ourselves. Let's just finish the It's just because I'm intrigued as to how you got to New Zealand. So 24 years there, and then we're going to come to the present day.
Well, I did a variety of projects in different places, including a big disaster in California in the recycling world. Taught me a lot about how much harder it can be than those of us who are sort of values oriented think it should be. We were recycling on a large scale, recycling construction and demolition material, particularly roofing materials.
So what sort of era? What year is this?
This was about 2000.
Yep.
Yeah, a little before that. And we had big machines to grind up tar and gravel and roof shingles and things like that so that they could end up in road beds as part of diverting material from the landfill. And we had an agreement. We were actually cited, the business was cited on land that belonged to Waste Management. But our deal was trucks could turn left and go over a different scale instead of go into the landfill and drop it on the hill, which cost them so many dollars per ton. They could come our way. They could pay a lower fee, a slightly lower fee, and give it to us, and we would grind it up and move it along where it needed to go.
Sounds good so far.
It does sound good so far.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? You're taking gravel and you're taking mineral material and asphalt and putting it into a roadbed where it's made of mineral material and asphalt.
Boom, go you.
There you go. And you're keeping that stuff out of the landfill, extending its life. I hired a young man who had been in the accounting field, and I was telling him about it with all this enthusiasm. And his answer to me was, or his question to me was, well, this sounds great, Ballard, but if we do all this, isn't somebody going to mind?
No.
Well, Waste Management did.
They noticed.
Because that was less profit going in their pocket. And eventually I lost a very substantial sum of monies where I had foolishly guaranteed some loans and purchase agreements and this and that. And it ate up a couple of years of my life. One of my other buddies I met at the time had tried to recycle tires by grinding them up and making crumb rubber and this and that. He said the one lesson he learned, which was kind of reminiscent for me, he says, the only thing I wish I had done different was to staple a $5 note to each tire before I put it in the grinder. And I said, why? He said, because I would have gone broke that much quicker and I'd have gotten the time back.
So Ballard, it was Waste Management whose ground you were operating on.
Yes.
They noticed that you were taking business off them,
which was part of the agreement. And there was a company that made the asphalt and paved the roads and stuff, and we were actually a subtenant of theirs. They were originally going to buy all this ground up product we were making, and then eventually they decided, no, we think we'll make you pay us to take it. And then they blocked us from being able to get to our site, so they put us in bankruptcy. Now, these are people that we were supposed to be recyclers with. And it ended up they wanted a lot of money from us for allegedly having to clean up our site, which they didn't have to because the landfill was coming right on top of it. It was right next to the hill. So it was, as it proceeded, and there was, anyway, it was a lesson learned that just because you think you're doing something good and you're trying to make the world a better place, don't think somebody's not going to mind.
It's also interesting, Bella, that just because you're doing good work doesn't make you a good person.
It does not.
There's lots of arseholes out there doing good things, but they're still arseholes.
Yes. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, what matters to us most, I think, so assuming we survive the pocketbook issues, is who we're doing it with and how we're doing with each other.
Yep. Yep. And do they mind?
Yeah. And do they mind? So I had a lot more work in the States there in healthcare. I did probably half of my career work in one healthcare setting or another, doing organizational change, doing sales and marketing, doing team building, doing consulting and counseling with executives, coaching, guiding, and reached a place where I was kind of betwixt and between, and my wife had finished up the work she'd been doing. And she said, "Why don't we go on an adventure?" And I said, "Sure, let's go on an adventure." So we'd had for a long time lovely fantasies about New Zealand, and it has greatly exceeded our fantasies to be here. We are.
So had you been here before?
No.
So you just seen pictures and
Yes.
stuff like that?
Yeah.
And you believed it?
And we'd met a few Kiwis.
Yeah.
And so she got a job. That was not hard.
Am I interviewing the wrong person today, Ballard?
Probably so. but that's your fault. And so she's the one who always has the dream about the next place to go, and
Right.
I'm the one who has to make the dream come true.
Right.
Yeah, so she took off and left Colorado and came down here once she got through immigration and all of that. And I had to sell the house and pack up all the stuff and tidy up the business affairs.
So what were you doing? What were you doing to tidy up professionally?
Well, I had an ongoing engagement at the time that I continued. I was a business partner in a neurology practice that was specialized largely in traumatic brain injuries and from car wrecks, automobile accidents. And I continued that for about a year and a half after we moved down here. So I was going back and forth, lots of long plane trips, and lots of teleconferences and going back up for conferences and events and doing the digital transformation work
Right.
for the practice. And most of that business came by referrals from attorneys. So I was doing the attorney cultivation side of things.
So still working with people?
Oh yeah. So we got to a place where that was, it was a good time for me to let go of that and focus here. And I had come, when I first came here, I didn't know anybody in the business world in New Zealand.
So you came to where? Timaru?
Timaru, yes.
Right.
Yeah. And I was fortunate to meet somebody by happenstance who told me about collective intelligence and invited me to look into it, and I did. And I recognized, okay, I don't have a group that I'm a part of, so at least this is a group of people who might be somewhat interesting and similar, and I looked at the values and all that, and made a call. And within a few weeks, the timing was you were about to form a group. So within a few weeks of making first contact, I was in the conference room in Wellington at the airport.
I remember that.
Yeah. And so CQ accelerated my, collective intelligence accelerated my knowledge of people, my in the country, my confidence in peerage with a sense of being accepted. Anytime you move to a new country and it's hard to know whether I'll fit in or not, what's going to be different, what's going to work, what it would take for me to contribute, and so I was much more confident, much less time than I would have been otherwise.
So how long had you been in New Zealand at that point when you joined the team?
Well, it had been about a year No, maybe half a year.
Right, certainly.
Maybe half a year.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're pretty new. I hadn't realised that.
Yeah. And of course, I was fortunate to be put in a team with some really good people.
All the teams are good people.
And half of them are still in the team.
Yes, they are.
And then we've gotten some other good people as well. So it's only gotten better as time's gone
Yep.
by. That's a really good team, Team No Bull. And then after I quit...
Apart from Steve Henry.
Steve Henry's the best. And when I discontinued my work with the neurology practice in Colorado, I decided it was time to walk across the street to the DHB. It's a smallish DHB, but I decided it was time. Well, actually, what I did was I went through LinkedIn and I made contact with the chairman of the board, and we met. And he said, "That's good. I think we could use some help in the leadership area. I'm going over to meet with the CEO. I'll mention you to him." And he did. And then I met with the CEO, and I said, "I think I could be of some help with leadership." And he said, "I think we could use some help." So very honest and generous on his part. But leadership and development was not something that was underway in any manner in the organization at the time. So here I was living across the street with a background that kind of aligned itself with that possibility, and here they were with not a high likelihood. They didn't want to be bringing somebody in all the time from Auckland or wherever. And it has been just a wonderful engagement for me to be a part and to develop a leadership program there that is now called Navigate, that has these good characteristics and superb results. The way people have come alive, as I explained it to Heather Simpson when she came down to do a review of this DHB. I said to her that we gave the people throughout this organization, because we're doing learning organization, we're doing flatter, we're doing less moving hierarchy away to the degree that we can, because that's really not the way to run healthcare.
Right.
Healthcare is about care. I said to Heather was, we gave the people throughout this organization the opportunity to change the culture, and they took us up on it.
Nice.
Yeah, and they have, and it's changing wonderfully.
So tell me about Navigate. What have you developed?
Well, it's we have several delivery versions, but the primary one is a program people sign up for a duration 3 months, and they have a duty to. They have a first task to figure out some theme for their leadership growth, leadership and learning. And they need to develop that theme in terms of personal growth, what their learning goals for personal growth are going to be, what their learning goals for behavioral skills in leadership. Leadership is a set of learnable skills. And we have some good material developed around that, but they need to figure out what they want to be focused on. And then professional competencies, professional expertise that they want to develop. And then how can they bring those three aspects together in some applied way into their workplace setting.
So what was there before? Just avoid.
Well, there were training classes in professional skills of various kinds. Really nothing in the personal growth area, and I don't think anything in the behavioral skills area to speak of.
Is this targeted at the management, or are there
We have had all the way from orderlies to CEO.
Really?
Everybody, yes. So they become part of a small team, half a dozen people or so, that meets fortnightly for 3 months. We have a bunch of workshops that they take on describing this model and setting it up, in communications, leadership, teams, and how to do evaluation in ways that are helpful. Each of these bits of the curriculum also kind of come out and play on their own. We're doing a lot of work with crucial conversations throughout the organization. And they get a mentor. They identify and pick a mentor. And then other activities that they want to engage in, tailored to their own purpose, whatever that may be. And we've had people go take classes at Aotearoa. We've had people go take mindfulness courses, a variety of things that people have done on their own. They've shadowed people who have the kind of jobs they have or they want to have. And then they go through that curriculum, and then this is the best part. We focus them on identifying what their unique leadership contribution is.
Right.
What is it they do that's more easy and with flair that really works to put them in the mix in a way that's not only best for them but best for those around them. How do they avoid the lure of hard-won mediocrity?
Yeah.
And engage in polishing best bet.
Ballard, is it sometimes difficult for them to work out what their thing is?
Oftentimes, we like the conversation I had with my friend George that I described for you. Oftentimes, somebody else has to tell them.
Right.
That yes, you're okay. You're actually brilliant at that.
Right. Right. And that might be the first time I've heard that.
That they let it in. Yeah, could be the first time they've let it in. And to see people come alive about that has been quite fun.
I'd imagine sometimes it'd be a bit emotional too.
It is. And we've had people say that this program has changed their lives. I would say they've changed their lives, and the program has been a vehicle. What really makes it work is what people bring into that context. I think about it as the work that I've done is 10%, set the stage is kind of 10%. I have a facilitation team that we've trained because all of our meetings are facilitated in very good ways, just like collective intelligence. And so that adds another 10%. And the 80% of the value is what they bring to each other when they come together. And you can just feel the energy. You can feel the value of what's going on rise when the groups come together. And we have really lovely, solid curriculum and leadership skills and communication skills and all that, but we try to elicit the content from the audience, from our participants, as much as possible in real time. So they give their version of it rather than, we do not lecture, we do not PowerPoint, we never turn on the projector, ever. And we use workshops, we use one-on-ones, we have laboratory sessions where people can show up and say, I have this important conversation coming up. Can I get prepared for that? Or I had this horrible conversation yesterday. Can we figure out what went wrong? We do that one-on-one. We do that in small sessions. So it's just so, frankly, exciting, inspiring, and rewarding for me to be at this stage in my career. And I'm not trying to grind roof shingles. I'm not trying to make a factory work better. I'm not trying to help financiers make more profit. I'm helping healthcare workers learn to be a community and helping leadership emerge, which really the thing I figured out when I was 20 years ago was that my pitch in life is about leadership. I want to create a world of leadership, and to do so by raising up inspired teams of people. When I see a team form and get to the place where they are connecting and collaborating, and they're acting out of a sense of inspiration for what they're doing, I just tick the box. My work is done here.
Well, it's interesting to listen to you because it sounds so easy, and I know it's not easy. But just the fact that you're making it sound easy means that you're in your place.
Yeah.
And I had the pleasure for those listening. I had the pleasure of sitting in on Ballard's host day, which we called host days, when Team Ball came to Timaru to review your work back in
February.
And listening, and we got a chance to interview a whole range of people about the program with Ballard out of the room to get the lowdown on the impact. And it was very cool to hear the range of impact on different people. And we interviewed a wide range of people, and it was consistent that it had made their lives more enjoyable. They enjoyed coming to work more. They knew what they wanted to do and dedicated their time to doing stuff they were really good at.
They're also better at what they're doing.
Yeah. So if you look at the compounding effect on this DHB, has that been analysed yet? Has it been going long enough to get a feel for that?
I think you can. I was very fortunate in the timing of things, which it's better to be fortunate with timing than almost anything else in life.
Yep.
And they had already made a commitment around a culture shift here at this DHB from a very hierarchical model to something that would be learning organization and that would be making more decisions related to patient care closer to the patient. And one of the missing pieces was the kind of leadership energy to do this organizational change. So, in a sense, the culture shift had been committed to,
right?
But it hadn't
moved
all that far.
Right.
There were first step things to do, like we got to really make a big dent in bullying of people in higher roles being harsh to people in lesser roles, that kind of thing, which, believe it or not, does exist in healthcare as well as in other industries.
Mm-hmm.
And we had data that said, okay, that was something we wanted to work on. I showed up at a time, so the new data about that measure is very significant change. I don't attribute that to Navigate. I attribute that to the overall cultural effort. But Navigate is totally blended into that at this point.
It's a catalyst.
Yes, it is. And the number of individuals who are now infiltrating the ranks with ideas about staying above the line instead of below the line, ideas about creating...
Hang on, just explain that.
Well, there's it's from a few years back, it's an attitude piece, and it's a simple idea. Below the line is sort of natural, but it's about winning, competing. It's the lower back part of the brain ruling the game, and it's also judgment and disapproval and disappointment. Self-defense, sometimes it's put into the acronym BED, BED. So it's blame, excuse, and deny.
Yep.
That's below the line. Above the line is another acronym, ownership, accountability, responsibility. It's about learning. It's about envisioning the possible future. It's about taking responsibility for my attitudes and my emotions and using those in responsible ways. So with a little bit of practice and a few minutes of reflection, it's possible to recognize, am I going below the line here? Or, so how can I get back above the line? as we can't create the future we want working below the line. If my aim is to win and defeat others, then I'm not going to create a culture of learning and curiosity. Judgment is not a tool to build a future of flourishing. It just doesn't work that way. So the number of people who are in this organization actively working to make it not only work better, but be a better place to work is growing and growing. And Navigate's been a significant part of that. I think that's a fair statement to make.
Ballard, I mean, the great thing with this conversation is so often we hear negative conversations around DHBs. They are often in the news for the wrong reasons. They seem a place of, they're often the biggest business in town. And, they're hugely important for lots of different reasons. And they employ a whole lot of people. So it's fabulous to have a conversation that is absolutely positive about a DHB.
The leadership from the chairman, the CEO, the strategic leadership team, and the next layer, these are significant, serious people, well-minded, with good values they hold dear, working hard. I've worked in organizations I loved. I've worked in organizations that were a pain in the ass. I love working with these people.
So,
and they are among the very best performing DHBs in the country in terms of amount of care the quality and amount of care that they deliver within appropriate financial budgets. It's a break-even DHB. They're not losing $100 million a year.
Yeah,
fill in the blank.
Yeah, and that's what they're known for. So Ballard, what's the potential with Navigate? Are you looking to take it further?
Absolutely. We're very open to. I think the kind of first possible place to go with it is into other DHBs within the Ministry of Health sphere that would have an interest, because the transferability is easy there. But it's not a program that is in any sense defined by being in the healthcare system. It can be used in any organization. It frankly can be used with individuals from totally different worlds who are willing to meet together on some kind of regularity, because the program is both the individual person tackling their leadership work for a period of time with some kind of theme to it, and the feedback and observations that we're able to give to each other, and the support that we can give to each other, the trust that happens in the groups in the teams that we form. So Team Noble is doing Navigate because they wanted to.
Have they started yet?
Oh yes, they have their themes and their plans, and they're working on them.
Brilliant.
And they have a notion for a Navigate 2.0, a next level, with additional emphasis on well-being and other kinds of things. So
your facilitator would be very excited about this.
Yes. Well, I probably shouldn't confess this here, but I'll go for it. Our facilitator has actually joined the team for that specific purpose, because it's a set aside.
Yep.
It's a set of relationships. We have an amazing collective intelligence facilitator, and we love her dearly. And we made sure that she wouldn't be excluded if she wanted to, on her own time, participate in the Navigate program. And she has adopted that for herself, partly because she's at a time in her personal life where she had some stuff she wanted to give attention to. We have eras where change is a little more afoot, and eras where stability is a little more identifiable. and this was one of those times to take a next step for her.
Ballard, it's something that's, look, I've talked about within our team that I'm seeing a lot of right now. There is a huge amount of fatigue out in the world in lots of different industries and different places. There is change coming at us. There are issues coming at us that we haven't faced before.
Climate, politics, things that get to survival.
Yeah, this is a whole different sphere now. And, last century we had a few world wars to contend with and so forth, but this is a different game. And it's interesting, I felt that the world changed on, January 2019, that people came back from their break in a different mode. And I think there's a huge amount of, there's a large number of people feeling overwhelmed out there at the moment, that they've been keeping their head above water up until now, and now there's a whole lot of new stuff coming, and people are struggling to cope, I think.
I think in order to cope, we have to avoid chaos on the one hand, and that starts from within, and we have to avoid a rigidity on the other hand of, no, this is the right solution.
Right.
I know this. It has to be done that way. Both rigidity and chaos are enemies of the kind of healthy flow that allows us to move forward as a team of people. It's like life is a river. On the one bank is an abrupt wall of rock, and on the other bank over there is a swamp. And you want to stay out of the swamp of chaos, and you don't want to be trying to knock down the wall that's rigid. And those rigidity and chaos both can live within us. And credit to an author, Dan Siegel, for his research in this area. He's a mindfulness expert from UCLA. But he went through the what's called the DSM, the Psychiatrist's Manual. And basically every illness he found was some combination of rigidity or chaos. That's what makes us unwell.
Mm.
That's what makes our organizational behavior unwell. That's what makes our societies and our planet unwell, is rigidity or chaos are both at the same time. So what we need to do is find ways to flow together, to have meetings of the minds in a fashion that allows us to learn and to be creative about what the future can be. The planet's still going to be here.
Yes, it's been here a long time.
Relevant to our time frame.
Yeah.
The planet's going to be here. The question is whether we're going to be here and how many of us. The planet would, in some sense, be better off if there were a lot fewer of us here. We talk about that the problem is the planet is failing us with its climate. You could look at it the other way. We're failing the planet by overpopulating it and doing things to its climate that are unconscious. And in hindsight, we'll say unthinkable. Hiroshima and Nagasaki seem unthinkable.
Mm.
But I assure you, in the minds of the serious people who were making decisions about whether or not to drop that bomb in 1945, they were thinking about it, and they thought about it in terms of number of deaths going down that path versus an invasion and occupation of the island of Japan, door to door, from end to end. And
it could still be going on now.
Yeah, and so I look at that as an event that is unthinkable, but concentration camps were unthinkable and yet they exist today. There are so many things that in history have been just atrocious, and yet they persist.
Mm. So Ballard, what's the bomb that needs to be dropped now? What's the bomb that needs to be dropped into society to create a different world?
Learning. We have to get warm to the idea of that we don't know the answers to everything, and if we learn together, if we provide leadership that is around what is it here for us to learn, then our system will evolve. We've, as humans, in this last century and a half, we have come to recognize that we weren't plopped here in a certain way, we evolved.
Mm.
And so we are beneficiaries of evolution that happened. We have some confidence that, okay, complex systems will evolve, good things will emerge, and it's possible to figure out how to do things better. It's possible to figure out how to survive in a changing world. Learning is the answer, and leadership in the fashion of influence and support of that is the difference, the step we can take to make a difference.
So it's funny how things come together. I am interested in writing a blog in the near future around what gets in the way of people learning. So I get frustrated when I see people blocked and organisations blocked, and just go, what is getting in the way of them learning? And, you know, that rigidity and the chaos.
It's the rigidity of I already know that keeps me from learning.
Yeah.
So let's say you're in Timaru, which you are, and you're going to go back to Christchurch, right? So you're going to get in a vehicle, and you could set the heading at 22 degrees northeast, which would get you to Christchurch, and just go. Except what would happen? You wouldn't get very far. You'd be off the road, because the way we actually steer successfully is we get information that tells us we're a little too far to the left, a little too far to the right. We get information that's negative information that says we're off course. In healthcare, the most valuable information is the information that says this didn't work.
Yeah.
If you're driving on that road, and let's say it's a little bit darker, and you're driving along and you hear this sound, and your response is not going to be, "Oh, that was rude. What did they put those there for? I was having a good nap." No, you're going to say, "Thank you for that information that tells me I'm getting off the path. I'm going to be in the ditch soon. There's a fence in my future." We need that information that tells us we're slightly off course.
Mm.
We can't navigate successfully without this precious information that tells us we have more to learn. It tells us something isn't working. We are so, because of this training we've had, this judgment-oriented education, and I don't know how many other things you could name, but we are conditioned to need to be right. It's human nature to want to be right. Being right is a huge impediment to learning.
Yeah, and look, I'm fascinated with curiosity, and you know why some people are, get really curious about stuff and others don't, and going, what's that all about? Why doesn't this person or organisation disagree with me or have a different view? And you see so often people will then, I don't like that view, so I am going to dehumanise you. I'm going to call you names. I'm going to call you tax cinder, or I'm going to make up some name. They did it with John Key as well, or they make, and they dehumanise it, and they, rather than getting interested in what is the view that they're trying to get across, or is there some validation here for this point of view?
The people who wrote the book about crucial conversations use the analogy of getting information into the pool. What we really want is a dialogue, and we want all the information into the pool so that we together can work on finding a solution. If my approach is winning, then I want my information in the conversation and not yours. But if I want to build a solution that's going to endure, I need for you to get your information into the pool, including all the information I disagree with, all the views that I don't share, so that we've got a comprehensive take. And truly, it's the mix of diversity of perspectives and knowledge that produces a higher quality decision.
It's interesting, the diversity thing, because I've talked about this recently, that diversity is great, but you've got to have inclusivity with it. So it's okay to have the diverse views, but they've got to be allowed. They've got to be allowed to be aired. They've got to be allowed to be and take away the status and all that sort of carry on and allow the dialogue.
It's got to be coveted. And I've got to be as eager for those views to be heard as I am for those little bullets on the side of the road to wake me up.
Yeah.
Because it's information I need to know. I've had a head full of ideas and information for a long time. And I've kind of gotten accustomed to that as a way of living. But none of it means anything until it lives in someone else in their fashion. And we decide to take some action, do something differently in the world. So for me to say something, to get my point out there, it accomplishes nothing. It's only when it lands in your mind and you feel it, think about it, decide what you want to do with it, make a choice, and make an agreement and take some action. Only then does it have any significance whatsoever.
You also see people having a point of view that I often think, is that point of view just to make their place, protect where they're coming from? Is that point of view there to protect their position, or is it something that's come from curiosity? And I think often I can tell the difference sometimes. You go, it looks like you're just wanting to protect your base and not let it be shaken up.
I hear you. Curiosity is a character strength. It's essential. It's essential to a healthy character. And character, good character, is what allows us really to find that place in the center of the court, to find that place of to be well centered within. We've got to be okay having the old term about conscience. You don't hear that term a lot anymore, but no, we have to live. We have to have a conscience, and we have to live with one.
Yeah.
Which, in my version of it, that's not okay. I've learned the rights and wrongs. It's I integrate all of the ways that I can think and feel. I sleep on it overnight sometimes is the analogy. And the next day I know something that the previous day was fuzzy.
Yep.
That's conscience.
Yep.
That it's like multi-dimensional truth as opposed to some single little thing on a flat framework. Curiosity needs to be given unfettered sway in my mind and in my life.
Ballard, you talked about before the timing, coming into the DHB here, and, it's known out of Silicon Valley that the most important aspect of a startup is getting your timing right. Everything else pales into insignificance. If you get your timing wrong, doesn't matter how much money you've got or the people. That's right. You'll spend it all. Yeah, it's it's not going to work. If you arrived here at the right time, and they were ready for this, so That would be the same working with other companies, working with, yeah.
I think it's the right time for the Ministry of Health at large, as they're engaged in kind of deep examination of what the framework needs to look like and how it should go. And there are many industries in this country that are ripe for looking at the possibilities of getting. Sure, there's plenty of things that are that operate well on a large scale and they're predictable. And it rains, it'll grow grass. We can have a cow convert that into money and send it overseas. But curiosity begins to add some other possibilities to that. And so what can we do to increase the value that we generate? I think it's odd to send milk solids in logs.
We're getting off track here a little bit, Ballard.
I think there's higher value ways to go.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I absolutely agree with you.
There's a lot of industries, and of course the digital world is growing rapidly in this economy and has a great deal of promise. But every one of those industries needs good leadership. And it needs to have an approach to leadership that's not about the leaders at the top. It's about the leadership contributions of everyone on the team.
Yeah. Look, I know some of those industries really well that you talked of, and they have been led by competitive males for a long, long time, beating each other up. Decisions being made by a very small number of white males, and their productivity, their place in the world is diminishing all the time. And some of their behaviour as a result becomes quite even more aggressive, but it doesn't get them ahead and it doesn't get them up to speed. And you talk about some of the tech industries, the whole mechanism around that is so different. You've got an example of that with Emily in your team.
Oh yeah, she's dynamic,
right? And about to solve one of the world's great problems, but from a place of not ego, no ego, from team environment. I met her, one of her team the other day. This wonderful young man, 21.
Yes.
Up in Auckland, I just went, wow, what a powerhouse.
And she's attracted people like that.
Yeah. That's right. That's the other thing, isn't it? So, interviewing Emily on Friday morning, which I'm really looking forward to.
Well, I know she's got good news coming out of her last round of pitches. And I had the privilege of chatting with her about the pitches as they were underway. You talk about somebody who's eager to learn. Emily way up on the list.
Yes, yeah. And I interviewed a chap on Sunday, Aniki Goodall, and as Aniki said, I have a great deal of faith in this younger generation, and they think differently and they see the world differently.
Thank goodness they do, because I think the fruits of my generation's handling of the world are, in many respects, significantly regrettable. There were certainly good things done, but we have continuous war now, and I think we could probably credit most of your white males with that, with at least half of that. There are plenty of folks who are contributing to there being unrest and war around the world. It's not just a European-bred male problem. But the idea that there's a right way to run the world, and this generation has has figured that out and has passed on the legacy and should just be conducted in business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
It just boggles my mind. I'm not smart enough to understand how anybody could look at what this generation of senior leaders around the world is passing on and say that's good enough.
Yep.
I think the results of what's going on are far more indication of blindness than enlightenment.
So, Ballard, it's how do people find you who are interested in the Navigate program? What's the best way to find you? Do we just put something at the bottom of this podcast so they can contact you? Do you have a website? Or
Sure, I've got a LinkedIn page.
Yep. Ballard Pritchett.
Yeah, and marketleadership.com. I have a website for that. I have certainly email capabilities, ballardpritchett@gmail.com will find me. And or you can knock on the door at the DHB in Timaru.
Okay.
Or I'm certainly happy for people to phone call me.
Okay. All right. So we'll put your details at the bottom of the podcast, Ballard, so people can find you if they need your skills.
Yeah, and we're eager to what makes a program like this possible is a team of facilitators.
Yep.
You couldn't have done collective intelligence without your facilitators.
Absolutely not.
And so the first step is the first step it was here, is to prepare facilitators. So we're happy to work with any outfit that's willing to step up and say, let's get half a dozen people prepared to lead this and to be able to model it.
Excellent. Ballard, thank you for your time. It has been an absolute honour to hear your story. It's intriguing where you've come from, and you know what I've heard is this vast amount of experience that's come through your learning from your family, from the education side, and all of that seems to have landed here in Timaru.
The number of my wife and I were speaking the other day. The number of, I'll just call them mentors, who have chosen to invest in me and in what they and others like me, and in what they see possible with people that take their work downstream. It's been a huge treasure. I don't want to get into lots and lots of names, but I'm profoundly aware of the people who invested in me, and it is very much my commitment in life to pass that on.
Great note to finish on.
Yeah.
Ballard, thank you.
Thank you, Harv. Thanks for what you're doing.
It's fun. You've just been listening to an episode of Stuff That Matters Now, brought to you by Collective Intelligence. I hope you enjoyed listening to the fun stuff, the rugged stuff, and the complete stuff-ups that have helped this particular Collective Intelligence member evolve while making the world a better place. Do check out our Stuff That Matters Now podcast series on your favourite podcast provider, or visit our website www.collectiveintelligence.co.nz to get links to new episodes. Contact us if you want to learn more about how we can help you evolve yourself and others. Thanks for listening.